Now we're going to look at a bunch of different checkmates and what they look like. We're not looking at any sort of methods for checkmating, and I'm not teaching you how to checkmate with these pieces every time, but I want you to see as students all kinds of different checkmates and what they look like. So here's what a checkmate can look like with a queen and a bishop. As you can see, the bishop guards the queen, and the queen is checkmating the king. And you may have seen a bunch of arrows just now, but like, for example, if the king tries to move to any of these squares, there's always a problem. The queen can attack there. The queen attacks here, here, and here as well. And if you try to take the queen, obviously, whoops, the bishop guards the queen. So we can't do that. Here's another one. This is kind of a bishop, knight, and king checkmate, where the king guards h7, bishop guards g7, and the knight guards g8. But it's white's turn. If this was black's turn, it would be stalemate because the king could not move anywhere. But since it's white's turn, we can move our bishop to g7, and now it's checkmate because all three of these squares have a defender, and we're attacking the square the king is on. Let's look at a smothered mate. A smothered mate is when the king is stuck, usually in the corner, and can't move anywhere because of his own pieces. And then we just move our knight into a position to check the king where the knight can't be taken or anything. And this is actually checkmate. That's a really popular, famous checkmate too. Now we're going to look at the two bishop checkmate. So in this situation, we see the king right here guards this square and this square, and the bishop here guards that square, or the b8 square. So if we add our other bishop into the mix, we have the following situation like this. And as you can see, every square that the king can sit on or move to has a green arrow passing through. That's not good. So that means it's checkmate. Here's a situation where we have a two-knight checkmate. This is, actually, I should say two-knight, king, and pawn checkmate. This is very rare, but here we go. This is checkmate. So this knight attacks the green squares. This knight attacks the blue squares. This pawn, oops, I'll make it yellow, attacks the yellow square, and this king attacks the red square. And as you can see, the black king wants to move to one of these squares, but each one of those squares is attacked by one or more pieces. So this would be a checkmate. This would be a very rare checkmate. You can't actually checkmate with two knights in a forced scenario. Basically, what usually happens with two knights is they can't force the king to the edge of the board, and then therefore they can't checkmate. All right, so here we have pawns, a pawn checkmate, where this is checkmate because you have the the a6 pawn is helping defend the b7 pawn, which is checking the king, and then the knight covers the other squares. So all of these squares are covered, and so is the one the black king sits on. Okay, so in this situation, we also have a checkmate in one move, queen to g7. So basically the bishop is guarding the queen, and the queen covers all the other squares. Not to mention there are also some of black's pieces on squares that his king could try to move to. And if you have pieces on your in front of your king like this, then you can't really move out of check because they're in the way. Although in this case with the queen, she would still be able to see the king. But anyway, this is what a king, another bishop and queen checkmate looks like. We can compare it to the first one. As you can see, it's very similar, although they came out slightly differently. So in this one, the white queen comes from this direction, and in the new one, if I can find where I was. Here it is. And in this one, the queen comes in from this way. So we had a queen come there to do checkmate in the first example, and now we have a queen coming from this direction. But it's essentially the same checkmate. So here's another one. Knight to here is checkmate. And again, I'll point out everything. We have 4 pieces that are on black's color. And then we have a 5th piece right here, this pawn here. But this pawn is pinned to the king. A pin means if the pawn were to move out of the way, like say to take this knight, the white queen would be putting him in check. And since you're not allowed to move your king in check, you can't do that. So this is another version of a smothered mate. If we go back and look at the example, you see there's pieces surrounding the king, and the knight reaches back and checkmates. Well, in this situation, it's the same thing. You have pieces surrounding the king, and the knight reaches back and checkmates. And the pin that the queen on e2 is doing against this e7 pawn prevents the knight from being able to be captured. So in this situation, we have h5 checkmate. So this is kind of a mix of a lot of ideas we've looked at. So for example, we've got 2 pawns blocking the king's retreat. We have a bishop down here guarding these 2 squares. The king cannot take the pawn because both the queen and the rook defend it. So that takes away all of these squares. And then we have a bishop and a queen attacking a few other squares. So basically, in this situation, we have all of these pieces are contributing to the checkmate, with the h-pawn here delivering the actual check, which will end the game because black is now checkmate. So anyway, I'm hoping that looking at all these different checkmates helps you understand what checkmate is and what you're trying to do. You can set up your own checkmates if you want and try to invent new checkmates. The challenge is, can you checkmate a king in the corner of the board, on the edge of the board, and then in the middle of the board? Because those are the 3 spots where you have to learn how to checkmate in chess. So good luck, and let your coach know what kind of checkmates you were able to come up with.